The New York Times has discovered that there is an end to Glenn Beck's contract at Fox. What does this mean? My response now.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
While on vacation, I saw that the New York Times had stopped focusing on the unimportant Charlie Sheen contract and moved to the really unimportant Glenn Beck contract. In case you missed it, let me summarize. Glenn Beck is crazy. He's dangerous. And nobody's watching because he's crazy and dangerous. And now he's so crazy and dangerous that even Fox, that is crazy and dangerous, can't even have him or his crazy and dangerous fans around. If I understand this line of thinking right, those who are bitter, angry, and clinging to God and guns, dubbed by the president and the media, are now done with me because I'm bitter and angry and clinging to God and guns? I don't follow that logic. But then they also point out that I talk too much about God and am constantly preaching against violence, neither of which I really believe in. Oh, man. But the fan, who they dub an illiterate zombie, somehow knows that I'm just faking it, even though they're a zombie and only following because they're too stupid to figure out that I'm just faking it, and they are now rejecting my view of a non-violent God. At first, I had hope reading the New York Times, because at first I thought, wow, the New York Times and the media may be in the beginning stages of admitting that there are some people, like radical Islamists, that believe in a violent God that says kill people for his purposes. But then I realized, no. They just found a story that could bash Glenn Beck or Fox. So I really didn't have anything deeper than that. Once again, crazy, dangerous, and of course now the new evergreen and perennial favorite in ratings decline. By the time the New York Times arrived to the in ratings decline conclusion, it was strange because I was only a CBS News estimate of the 828 crowd of 87,000 people away from the actual audience size that the Times themselves used to declare that I was a ratings phenomena just 2 years before. Isn't that weird? And that was the time before, Time Magazine put me on their cover declaring, of course, that I was a crazy madman. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I've decided that the media and the American left have become nothing more than a shampoo label and should be disregarded as we disregard most shampoo labels because they all say the same thing. Lather, rinse, repeat. And that's all they do. And that is why, in the end, they will fail. And that's not my truth. My truth's not going to be their undoing. Their lack of understanding the truth will be their undoing. Currently, the media and the political chorus is singing the praises of revolution in the Middle East and declaring from their pulpits of the past that I again am dangerous and must be stopped. Oh, Luke Skywalker. You want this. The predictions that I have made that the revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt would spread around the Middle East and then to Europe was incendiary. I mean, that's crazy talk. In addition to the accusation of being crazy, they now label me as, in the New York Times, apocalyptic and too much of a downer to watch. Well, I guess if you're used to looking at the surface and not reading your own newspapers, you could put me in the downer to watch box. Yeah. But that would only be because the very things that I've warned against, that, you called conspiracies or far out theories, and quote, out and out crazy talk, end quote, that make it quote, only right to have him committed, end quote, or at least, quote, find something in the Constitution to limit Glenn Beck's free speech, end quote, are now all beginning to be headlines in your very newspaper. Isn't that weird? You should read your paper from time to time. For those who may, and I think there may be, maybe, I don't even think my wife is in this category, that may find themselves with an idle moment or two to wonder what the future holds for me, let me answer. Yes, my contract is up at the end of the year. Contracts do that. Fox and I have had a great relationship, and the current contract does come to an end in December. My admiration for the people that work at Fox and the people that have built Fox cannot be overstated. In short, Roger Ailes has built not only the most powerful name in news in America, but he has built the most powerful name in news on planet Earth. And much to the left's amazement and chagrin, he's done it all without bashing America. Isn't that weird? Now, the same cannot be said for the new media darling Al Jazeera. The fawning over the mouthpiece of al-Qaeda and the defender of radical Islam should not be surprising to the average American. After all, progressives are all about progress, and the next logical step from MSNBC could only be the network to which bin Laden sends his actual terrorist tapes. The press has come to the conclusion that what the press is reporting is all about my desire to make more money and Fox's desire to retain me cheaper. Oh, had they only listened or watched any of the thousands of hours of broadcast time, or if it was they instead of my 4 million readers that they claim don't actually read my books, that had actually read my books instead of living in self-imposed ignorance. They would know that I didn't negotiate my first contract with Fox. It was a deal that was done with a handshake. You know, the way cowboys that still exist in America still make a deal with a handshake. What my average listener, or you, understands is the same thing that the media couldn't grasp at 828, that there are actually people that still believe in something. And when the chips are down, they will stand where they believe they are being told to stand. Last year, I outlined the direction of my company for my partners here at Mercury in New York. It is by far the most ambitious undertaking we have ever done. And we've tried some pretty big and incredible and crazy things. My business partner, Chris, pointed out after the end of my outlining where I thought the company needed to go, he said, "Glenn, nobody's ever done that." I pointed out to him, "Oh, yes, one man has." Where this goal eventually takes us and who joins us on this journey is anybody's guess. The media, of course, will say, "Oh, it's crazy, it's dangerous. Oh, it's only about money, fame, or that's too much God." But I bet that you will just do what you're currently doing. Keep minding your life and working hard and being independent. Most Americans, I suspect, will, in growing numbers, join the millions of Americans that have just stopped listening to those who have contempt for the ideas that built this nation, the ideas that involve values and principles. I will continue to stand where I believe I'm being led to stand, and not for ratings or for money, but because I am just like millions of Americans whose name, the New York elites, have never heard, or if they had heard, they would have mocked them anyway. Just like the now mainstream radicals that hate America from all walks of life, I'm just part of a larger group that loves this country and now feels almost forced to stand in what is now being called a radical, crazy, or foolish position. A place that millions now occupy because our lives are at last ruled by values and principles. Because we know in order to survive, our country must restore itself to sanity. The kinds of values that our grandparents had and celebrated and built this country on: thrift, honesty, charity, hard work. values that don't worship celebrity at any cost, free government money at no cost, and ethics that in the end will exact the highest cost. What so many in New York or Washington no longer believe, I do. And I'll bet you do too. That God lives, and God is not neutral in our lives or in our actions. I also believe, I have this crazy notion, that God is actively involved in preserving man's freedom. And this is what compels me to do what I do. In the end, I will be counted. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "To not stand is to stand. To not speak is to speak." We are facing issues that will be written about for generations to come, and if not by God, history at least will hold us accountable. So there are no negotiation tactics, New York Times, no PR move, no ratings ploy, because in the end, there is only the truth, and the truth has no agenda. If I feel in the end that I'm to build a ballpark out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a cornfield, oh, believe me, I will do it. Because I trust the only one that really knows how this story ends. So what does this mean for you and me? Well, one of the many, many, many reasons why I don't freak out about, the earth has a temperature, global floods, fires, food riots, the movie that Al Gore made. The reason why, the New York Times will tell you that one's just the truth. That's not apocalyptic. The reason why I don't worry about that apocalyptic movie is because I know the only thing in life that is constant is change. And so while things, and I don't know which, will change, all things do. But I know that we'll continue to find each other, whether on the radio, the internet, on stage, in movie theaters, in the pages of books that the New York elite will never read, or on Fox that the New York elite will never watch. A nuclear expert told me once, right after 9/11, that the most shocking thing about a nuclear attack is how many people will survive. The answer is most will. That's why most historians now deem the actions of the Americans in the 1950s responsible. It was responsible for Americans to store food and to know where their fallout shelter was and to build some. And it was responsible for our children to be taught in sometimes nightmare-inducing ways the devastating effects of global thermonuclear war. Well, what has changed? I mean, besides the device, because the device has changed, but not the effects. The Treasury's printing press or our lack of ethics and celebration of corruption and death will certainly do what the Russians hoped to achieve back in the 1950s and 60s. A nuclear flash would have blinded far fewer than the flash of political correctness that is blinding Americans from coast to coast. And yet there's nobody in our classrooms teaching our children to duck and cover on that larger, more dangerous threat. In the same week, the New York Times carried the story about how I was too gloomy to watch and apocalyptic. They carried the news that the Japanese earthquake killed tens of thousands, that it was one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded, that the tidal wave, which had wiped whole towns off the map, had traveled from Japan to the Golden Gate Bridge faster than you could fly that distance in a jetliner. In the same paper that reported, oh, Glennie is so gloomy, they reported that the entire island of Japan had been moved by about 8 feet, that the Earth's rotation had been altered, the planet's axis had been shifted. Oh, apocalyptic Glenn. Not to mention the stories of the power plants that were exploding, the food shortages, the deaths in Japan were on page 1, while page 2 and 3 were about how radicals are gaining power in the Middle East and anti-Americanism is growing in Libya because of our failure to actually stand with people. They missed the story, however, of North Korea developing an EMP. Oh, yeah, look it up. PIMCO, the world's largest private holder of U.S. treasuries, announcing that they're going to begin selling all of them, or the fact that Susie Orman now says the American dream is officially dead. But I'm apocalyptic. The New York Times and others saw no irony in their Mr. Gloomy Pants critique, while at the same time they would run these stories and provide no real insight or answers to these major catastrophic and, dare I say, has anyone noticed that they're more and more familiar events? I have noticed. I think you have noticed. Millions all around the world have noticed. And that's why I will continue to tell the story. I will continue to tell not only the story, but what I believe it means and what we can do about it. And I will continue to do so all the way down to my very last ratings point or very last book that could possibly be sold in the discount shelf, or my very last dollar, if need be. Because the truth is obvious. Tough times are coming. Things are changing. And believe me, it has very little to do, if anything, with that big, fat, gas-guzzling SUV. There are reasons the world is on fire, be it in Japan, Greece, or America. Some of these events are natural and thus we have no effect on them. We can't control earthquakes. Others we can. Others we can fix, or at least lessen the impact, if we first dare to address our problems like adults and responsible citizens. I, for one, have done my best to awaken a slumbering and hungover nation. Those who are awake now know the biggest thing that they can do is to take control of their own lives, accept responsibility for their mistakes, learn from them, correct, and move on. We know that we need to educate ourselves on history, on the Constitution, science, and, dare I say it, the matters of faith in God. What? That's crazy apocalyptic talk again. We need to be who we promised ourselves and our children we would be on 9/12/01. Our best and highest self that wasn't PC or political, that valued family over money and each other over stuff and fame. People that were imperfect and made mistakes, but then would admit them and move on. A growing number of Americans are finally seeing that the problems are found in Washington and not the solutions. But they are now also coming to the truth that there is only one way to change our country. And it's not to change some governmental regulation, but to truly change ourselves. This is why you will find millions of Americans standing where they believe God is asking them to stand, knowing that they will be mocked, bullied, or even in some cases lose everything. We do it not for guts or glory, but because we still believe in something. Americans have always done the hard work. When the times require it, we do it. We have also instinctively known that no matter how dark things may seem, when Americans pull together, while remaining strong and independent, we survive. And that is the truth. That is the crossroads of the American dream and the American story. And so whether it be in our dreams or occasional nightmares, it is there that you will find me, simply reminding whomever will listen that the most important part of our exceptional history are to be found in the last few letters of that word. Story.